3 nights ago, I caught something in my basement. It didn't fight the trap. It sat perfectly still behind the wire mesh, looked directly at me, and said my full name first and last, a name I have never once spoken out loud in that house before I said a word to it. Then it smiled, wrong, in a way I still can't fully describe, and said the only thing it would say for the rest of that night. You shouldn't have caught me. I'm recording this because I don't think I'm going to get another chance to. If you're watching it, I'm probably not the one who's going to explain what happened next. The cage is real. You'll find it exactly where I left it. What's inside it now is not what I caught. Let me tell you how this started. I bought the house on Corbett Street 14 months ago, old, cheap, freshly divorced, wanting somewhere nobody else had lived with me. The inspector called the basement dry and solid. He wasn't wrong. Exactly. He just didn't check behind the furnace. The sound started in month 4. Settling, I told myself. Old wood, temperature drops. By month 6 it had a rhythm, slow, deliberate steps, crossing the basement in a straight line and back. I noticed, somewhere in there, that it sometimes sounded like 2 sets of feet, slightly out of time with each other, like a person walking with a limp. I told myself that was just an echo off the concrete. I want that detail on the record now, because I didn't think it mattered then. By month 9 I'd stopped calling it rats. I never said out loud what I thought it actually was. I just stopped going down after dark. The night that finally broke me was in November, footsteps stopping directly under my feet in the kitchen, then 2 knocks on the underside of the floor, exactly where I stood. I didn't check. I went back to bed and told myself, one more time, that it had been the pipes. 3 days later I finally went down, daylight. Every light on, flashlight anyway. In a box of the previous owner's junk I hadn't opened, I found an old analog security camera, a dust-caked hard drive beside it, and a sticky note in handwriting that wasn't mine. It said one word: don't. I plugged it in before I'd finished my coffee. One file. 40 minutes, timestamp 6 years earlier, just after 2 a.m. 31 empty minutes. Then something walks into frame on 2 legs, man-shaped, long in the joints, crossing the basement in 4 strides where a person needs 8. It stops under the bolt and looks up at the camera. For a fraction of a second, 1 frame, maybe 2, easy to miss if you're not looking for it. And I wasn't. The first 4 times I watched it there's a second shape but at the very edge of the shot, behind the first one, done before I could be sure I'd seen it at all. I told myself it was a glitch in a 6-year-old hard drive. I want that on the record too. At the 39-minute mark, it says something. The microphone barely catches. It's a name. Not mine. I didn't recognize it that night. I would recognize it soon. Once I knew what I was looking for, the basement told a different story. Behind the furnace, in a gap I always assumed was too narrow to matter, I found a space that had clearly been used, scratch marks in the concrete, deep and evenly spaced, in a smell like ozone, like the air right before lightning, baked into the walls. The marks weren't uniform. I noticed that and dismissed it in the same breath. Some scored deep and narrow, some shallower and wider apart, like 2 different hands had made them at 2 different times. I decided it was weathering, nothing. I decided a lot of things were nothing. That week, there were small objects arranged with what looked like intention: a marble, a key that fit no lock in the house, and a water-damaged photograph. This house, this porch, 3 adults and 2 children I didn't recognize, smiling for the camera. I would come to recognize one of them very soon. I sat with all of it for a long time that afternoon, and I want to be honest about what I felt, not mostly fear. Curiosity, reckless and specific, the kind that frightened me worse than fear itself would have. By evening I decided I was going to catch whatever was living behind my furnace. That decision was the first real mistake. Not the last. The first. I built it the way you build a trap for something dangerous: in a live welded mesh, reinforced hinges, a trigger mechanism adapted from a coyote design and reinforced with parts from a hardware store where nobody would remember my face. It took 4 days. Every evening, the bare bulb overhead and the gap behind the furnace watching the whole time, though I kept telling myself that was nerves. On the fifth night I said it, baited with nothing. I had no idea what such a thing would want and went upstairs. At 2:47 a.m. The trapdoor slammed shut 2 floors below me, and the house went so quiet it felt like it had stopped breathing along with me. I sat on my bed for 20 minutes before I found the nerve to go look. It was already facing the stairs when I came down, as if it had known exactly which direction and exactly what time. Man shape, sitting cross-legged in a posture no human spine allows, skin the color of old ash, eyes reflecting my flashlight back at me too steadily, too deliberately, like it was choosing to reflect the light rather than doing it by accident of anatomy. It didn't throw itself at the mesh the way any trapped animal would have. It simply watched me cross the floor, and when I was close enough, it spoke. My full name. First and last. Then a smile built from the wrong muscles, arriving a half-second late, like the expression had to travel to reach the mouth in a sentence. You shouldn't have caught me. I asked what it was. It didn't answer. It only repeated the sentence 4 more times, same tone, same rhythm, until I went back upstairs and left it there, in the dark, saying the same 6 words to an empty room. I came back in daylight, telling myself that would help. And then, it hadn't moved. When I approached, it watched me with something that, on a human face, I'd have called patience, but patience is not the same thing as kindness, and I want you to hold on to that distinction. Because I didn't, not for a long time. You want to ask me things? It said. Ask them. I've waited considerably longer than you have. How do you know my name? I have known it since before you moved in. I knew the man before you. And the family before him. I know a great deal about the people who live above me. It's most of what I do down here. And pause, and something in the pause felt deliberate. I held breath before a card is played. You'll want to know whether that's a comfort or a threat. I'm not going to tell you which. You'll decide that for yourself, eventually, the way everyone does. What are you? You already have the word. Say it. Or don't. I'm the thing your species calls a demon. I won't apologize for it. It's close enough the way ocean is close enough for something you've never actually swum across. Why were you in my basement? I wasn't in your basement. It said. I was in this house. There's a difference. I suspect you'll spend a great deal of the next few days wishing I hadn't had to be the one to explain it to you. Its eyes didn't blink the way I should. And I couldn't decide, watching him, whether it was warning me or simply enjoying the shape of my fear. I still can't decide that, looking back. I don't think it wanted me to be able to. But what he told me next was something I was never supposed to hear. 2 days later, in a county records folder I had no business seeing, I learned the man who owned the house before me had died in that basement 6 years earlier. Cardiac arrest. Officially. The report noted, almost in passing, that his body was found inside a cage of his own construction, welded mesh, reinforced hinges, a trigger mechanism the responding officer called unusually sophisticated, and that the cage, when they found him, was empty. I sat in my car a long time after reading that, doing math I didn't want to do about how identical my trap was to a dead stranger's, and about how carefully, one small choice at a time, I had been steered toward exactly this basement. That evening I asked it directly. The man before me. Did he catch you too? Something like reluctance crossed its face, or something that wanted to look like reluctance. I've stopped trusting my read of its expressions. I'm not sure I ever should have trusted it in the first place. Yes. What happened to him? He made a mistake. It said. The same one nearly everyone makes eventually, no matter how carefully they start. I'm going to tell you what the rules are, instead of letting you find them the way he did. It watched me for a moment before adding, almost gently, almost not. I want you to notice that I didn't have to offer you that. Ask yourself, later, why I did. There are 3. It said. I'm not required to tell you any of them. I'm telling you because I'd rather this go differently than it went with him, or because it amuses me to watch you try to keep them. I'll let you decide which, over time. First, never move the cage from this room. It doesn't just hold me. It defines the shape of what I'm permitted to be, down here, specifically. Shifted, even slightly, and you changed that shape without meaning to. Second, never feed me anything that was once alive. I don't need food the way you understand needing it, but accepting something living creates an obligation between us you do not want to exist. If some misguided kindness moves you, bring me something that never breathed. Saw. Stone. Metal. Third, and hear its voice drop, tearful in a way that felt almost theatrical. Never ask me a question you aren't prepared to hear the true answer to. I don't want it, Daniel. That isn't a comfort. It's a warning. Every question gets a complete, honest answer, and some of those answers cost considerably more than you expect to pay. Which one did he break? The man before me. The third, it said. He asked about his daughter. I answered honestly. His heart couldn't hold what I told him. A pause. You'll ask me things too, eventually. Everyone does. I've never once had to wait very long. For the first several days, I followed the rules exactly, and I want to describe the 2 times I almost didn't, because I think they matter more than the day I finally broke one outright. On the 3rd day, I decided the basement lighting was too poor to see it clearly, and I actually told myself this, out loud, like a reasonable explanation that dragging the cage 6 feet toward the bare bolt wasn't really moving it in a sense the rule meant. I got as far as gripping the frame, feeling the cold of the steel bite into my palms, before it spoke without me having asked it anything at all. Don't, it said, and its voice had lost every trace of the patient, faintly amused tone I'd gotten used to. Not 1 inch. You are close enough right now that I can feel the shape of this room starting to loosen at the edges. Daniel. Let go of the cage. I let go. The room, for just a moment, had felt wrong in a way I can't fully describe, like standing in a hallway that's very slightly the wrong length for how many steps you've taken. It passed the instant I stepped back. What would have happened? I asked, my hands still cold from the metal. I don't know precisely. It said. That's the honest answer. I promised you honest answers. I know it would not have been small. I know the man before you moved it 4 inches once, on a night he was frightened and not thinking clearly, and the lights in his house did not work correctly again for 11 days. It watched me for a moment. I'm not going to tell you whether I wanted you to try that just now. I think you should sit with not knowing. The second time was smaller, and it embarrasses me more, because it came from something as simple as pity. A moth had gotten into the basement, drawn to the bare bolt, and it was dying slowly against the concrete near the cage, wings beating weaker and weaker, the specific small tragedy of an insect that's picked the wrong light to worship. Some old, useless instinct in me, the same instinct that once made me carry spiders outside instead of killing them, reached down toward it, intending, I think, to offer it to the cage rather than let it die alone on the floor. Stop, it said, before my hand had closed around the moth. Its voice had an edge to it I hadn't heard before, not fear this time. Something closer, a hunger, briefly unguarded before it caught itself and smoothed the sound back into something calmer. That is still alive, Daniel. Barely. It doesn't matter how little life is left in a thing. The obligation forms the moment it changes hands, not the moment it stops moving. I pulled my hand back. The moth died on its own, a few minutes later, without either of us touching it. What would it have cost me? I asked. I would have owed you something, it said, and you would not have liked what I chose to consider fair payment. I want to be honest, some part of me wanted you to do it anyway. I don't often get offered anything. That wanting was mine, not a trick, I think. I've been down here long enough that I'm no longer entirely certain I can tell the difference myself, and I'd advise you not to trust my certainty on that point any more than I trust it. That was, I think, the closest it ever came to telling me something true about itself without being asked. I didn't know yet how rare that was. I broke the 3rd rule on the 7th night, and I broke it because of my ex-wife. I hadn't planned to ask about her. I went down that night intending something small and safe, a question about the previous owner's handwriting. But sitting there, In the low light, across from something that had already proven it would answer anything honestly, an old wound I'd thought finished simply opened on its own. And I heard myself ask before I decided to. Does she ever think about me? Does she regret leaving? It was quiet longer than it had ever been quiet before, long enough that I understand now, too late, that the silence itself was a kind of mercy. The door held open for me to walk back through if I chose to. You do not want this answer, it said. I asked you a question. You did. And I am bound to answer it completely and honestly. I am asking you once, as something close to a courtesy, whether you'd like to withdraw it instead. I didn't withdraw it. Nobody made me insist. When it finally answered, the answer was exactly true. And exactly as devastating as it had warned me it would be, and I have not been the same person since I heard it. I'm not going to repeat it here. Not to protect a secret. Because I don't think you'd survive it any better than I did, and I'd rather you not carry it the way I've had to. Something changed in the house after that night. A second set of footsteps, layered under the ones I now understood belonged to the thing in the cage, coming from somewhere the cage couldn't reach, out of time with the first set. The same uneven double rhythm I talked myself out of hearing back in month 6. I thought about the scratch marks that didn't match the single frame of second shape on the old tape. I'd noticed all of it, piece by piece, for months, and dismissed every single piece on its own. I asked it directly whether it was alone down here. It looked at me a long time before answering, and something in its face, for the first time since I'd caught it, looked almost like fear, with a very good imitation of fear, something like it might choose to wear, if fear was useful to show me at that particular moment. I no longer know which. I don't think I ever will. No, it finally said. There's another one. There has always been another one. I didn't tell you, because you didn't ask, and I'm only obligated to answer what I'm asked completely and honestly. I'm not obligated to volunteer what you haven't thought to ask for. I'm not proud of that loophole, Daniel. It's simply the shape of what I am. Where is it? Closer than you'd like. Considerably less interested in roles than I am. Why didn't it come with you? Into the trap. Something crossed its face that might have been its version of smile, and this time there was no warmth in it anywhere. Because I was the one it wanted you to catch, it said. You didn't build this trap for me. You built it exactly the way I described it to you. One small choice at a time, the same way the man before you did, the same way everyone in this house's history eventually did. I'm not the danger you should have been worried about. I'm the thing that's been keeping the actual danger occupied down here, in this cage, for 6 years. I asked, my voice unsteady. What happened now that I knew? Now, it said, we find out how much longer I can keep doing that. Or whether I ever actually was. The first sign was small light flickering in the hallway upstairs, on and off, 3 times, at an hour my phone insisted was 3:08. Even though I was certain less than 20 minutes had passed since I'd last checked it. I went to the top of the basement stairs and listened. Nothing. I told myself it was the wiring, the way I'd told myself everything else for 40 months, and I went back to bed. 20 minutes later, something scratched, once, on the inside of my bedroom door. I have never installed a lock strong enough to need scratching for me inside of a room I was standing in alone. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, and at some point past 4, I heard the basement door bolted, the way I bolted it every night since the cage began to groan, slow and low, a sound that didn't match the hinges I remembered installing. I did not go down immediately. I want that honest, the same way I've tried to keep everything else honest. I sat at my own kitchen table, in the light, negotiating with myself, for what my phone claims was 6 minutes and felt, at the time, like most of an hour. I went down because staying up there, not knowing, had become worse than whatever waited below. The cage was still there. The demon was still inside it, but its posture had changed completely, tighter, coiled, ice-fixed past me, at the open basement door in the stairwell beyond it, not at me at all. Close it said, and there was real urgency in its voice for the first time since I'd caught it. Now, Daniel. I turned. I reached for the door. Something was already standing on the other side of it, close enough to touch, and for one full second, before every light in the house died at once, I saw its face. I'm not going to describe it. Every attempt I've made since has felt like making it more real by trying to hold its shape in words. The lights came back 11 seconds later. I counted, out loud, the only thing my mouth could manage besides screaming. The stairwell was empty. The basement door was closed, though I don't remember closing it. The cage stood open, its door hanging on a single twisted hinge, as if something had simply decided the metal no longer applied to it. The demon was gone. I'm recording this in the kitchen, 3 days after the cage opened, because I don't think I'll get another chance, and because some stubborn part of me still believes a record left behind matters more than whether anyone's alive to have left it. I haven't seen the demon since. That isn't good news. Its absence has been worse than its presence ever was. I've heard the footsteps every night since, heavier, closer, moving through rooms the basement thing never reached. I found marks on my own bedroom door I didn't put there. I've woken twice standing in the kitchen with no memory of walking there, my own voice on my phone's recorder saying something into the dark I have no memory of saying and haven't made myself listen back to. I think I finally understand what it meant about keeping the actual danger occupied. I think I understand what happened to the man before me, and the family in the photograph, and every quiet name in this house's long history who eventually asked one question too many, or moved one thing 6 inches, or opened a door they should have left shut. If you're watching this, if you're watching it because I'm gone, because someone finally called about the smell, or the mail, or a car that hadn't moved in too many days, I need you to hear the only part of this that still matters. Don't go looking for me. Whatever's in that basement now is not something you want to find. If you're watching this, don't come looking for me. And if you're still listening, remember this. Some stories are better left unexplained. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't what we discover in the darkness. It is what might be waiting for us when the lights come back on. This story is fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for more dark stories. And whatever you do tonight, don't listen too closely to the silence.